911, operator 132, what is your emergency?
CSI, CSI Miami, CSI New York, Bones, Criminal Minds, all primetime TV shows that have recently popularized the world of forensics. 6 years ago, Helena Busen had a vision to bring this interesting field into Central Bucks.
Kids would come up and say they loved science, didn't want to be a doctor, didn't want to work in a lab. What can I do with it? So I used to watch crime scene investigations on TV, loved the programs, loved Murder, She Wrote, Diagnosis Murder, all those cool shows, and I said, why not let the kids use chem, physics, and bio, put it all together, solve crime? Overall view was to have the kids learn all the techniques and then take a final exam incorporating all the techniques used, all hands-on. So every laboratory technique, working in a small group, 4 or 5, depending on how large the class is, and then they analyze all the evidence and come up with a suspect and write up a formal report.
Since then, this elective course has taught the science behind the popular field. It is a platform for students to employ and expand upon the concepts they've learned in chemistry, physics, and even biology.
Forensic science, being relatively new to the high school population, is pulls from each of those different sciences, and it pulls some of the more major lab techniques and principles from all of those different sciences. So if we talk about serology, bloodstain patterns, we look at how blood from a blunt force trauma to, say, a victim's head would, how that impact would spray the blood against the wall or against the victim or against the attacker. How the blood travels through the air involves physics topics such as air resistance, gravity, size of the droplet, density of the droplet, viscosity of the droplet. Then that ties into the chemistry aspect of it. What makes up blood? Why does the blood soak into different items like paper or beds or sheets or clothing? And then of course with blood you can analyze for DNA, which is at the heart biology in that aspect.
Forensics allows for the scientific disciplines to converge, requiring students to think analytically to solve problems. The course provides students with an opportunity to explore such topics as crime scene investigation, fingerprinting, trace evidence, including hairs, fibers, and glass, impression evidence, including footwear, tools, and tires, document analysis, serology, and toxicology. Along this journey, a large emphasis is placed on allowing students to learn by doing. The class is very hands-on, as students work collaboratively on lab activities 2 or 3 times a week. Thus, when it comes to the final exam, it makes sense for the students to show us what they've learned.
We take a lot of notes, but we also do a lot of hands-on experience, and we do a lot of labs, and that's a lot of fun. I'm not really the kind of person that likes to sit down all the time, so I liked that part of it, and the final's definitely pretty cool.
The Forensic Science final exam at CB South occurs in 2 parts. 50% of the final exam score comes from a traditional paper and pencil-based test. Then the remaining 50% comes from a lab practical. The lab practical is an authentic, inquiry-based assessment requiring students to work collaboratively for an entire week to solve a crime from start to finish.
The exam we usually have, depending on the size of the class, 5 to 6 crime scenes, individual setup. They're all taped off. The kids are given roles. They have the documenter, and they have the fingerprint lifter, and then they have the hair and fiber analysis. So they pretty much pick the kid who's done the best on that section, pull their thoughts, and then they'll come to a conclusion together when they draw the analysis in. But they'll get one specific thing. They then sketch out the entire crime scene, have to locate all the evidence, flag it, then people will go through and dust for fingerprints, lift evidence using the tape lifting or whatever. They might have to fume to get fingerprints out. They do everything.
So how does this final happen? Well, this week-long assessment does not come together overnight. For a couple of weeks leading up to the test, Mr. Gable, Mrs. Busen, or Mr. Hensel, depending on who is teaching the course at the time, will brainstorm scenarios, compile evidence, and gather fingerprints, handwriting, and hair samples from the suspects. Then the Saturday before the exam, we clear all the desks out of the classroom and create 6 separate crime scenes, a process that takes a lot of time, patience, and precision.
We spend probably a week to 2 weeks leading up to that weekend organizing what we're gonna set out for the crime scene, figuring out what's going to be at each crime scene, figuring out what the main piece of evidence is going to be to link the suspect to the crime. It's very easy for us to fall back on using fingerprints to link the suspect, but we also want to make it more challenging. And over the years, we've adapted it to leaving a couple strands of hair that will definitively identify the suspect, or partial prints of the side of the hand or side of a finger.
On the Friday before the exam, the students are placed into their investigative teams. Each team is given a folder containing the various roles that will need to be filled throughout the week, and the grading rubric that they will be scored with. They are then given time to discuss and assign roles based on what each individual thinks they can excel at. Roles include crime scene sketcher, crime scene photographer, evidence collector, fingerprint technician, hair and fiber technician, footwear technician, tool and tire technician, and blood spatter technician. Then over the weekend, they can study their lab notebook, which they created over the course, to make sure that they are an expert at their duty. Come Monday, the investigative teams enter their crime scenes, are given a brief statement from the first responding officer, and then the final begins. No more instruction is given from the teacher. As an educator, it is very rewarding to observe the process that ensues. Students working together, brainstorming, problem solving, thinking out loud. They keep tabs on each other to make sure everyone is doing the correct process, the processes that they have learned, practiced, and mastered earlier in the course. Now it all comes together.
Our scene was, it looked like a body had fallen off a desk, like she was sitting at a desk and she had fallen back. And she had a spilled pill bottle found in her hand, and we found a hair on her hand. And that was pretty much it. There was a folder on the desk and a spilled Coke can, but that was it. That was all we had to work with. And so I remember our group on the first day, we weren't going to open the folder because we didn't want to look in it. But we actually did open it, and there was a will. And so that was really exciting because we got to analyze the will, and we did a whole unit on handwriting analysis. And so we knew we were going to be able to use that, and that was something that we all really liked. And then towards the end, after the third day, our last day of having the scene, we didn't really have any leads or anything, and so we were just dusting everything for fingerprints that we could find. And on the last day, we actually found 2 big handprints on the chair, and so that was really cool. And then we lifted them and analyzed them, and so that was like our biggest piece of evidence. We actually found out that it was a nurse who killed her, and we think it was her oldest daughter, because on the will, it looked like there was eraser marks in the spots that said oldest daughter, and so it looked like she had changed like whatever the mother had originally written to her, so we think that that's her oldest daughter who might have killed her, and just so made sure that she got everything that she wanted.
Ours was called a burglary in an office, and we had a lot of different evidence. A lot of it was fingerprinting that we had to dust and lift off of bins and desks and a chair that was knocked over on the floor. And we had a lot of pieces of paper and pens and pencils that we had to collect and put them in airtight bags so we could send them off to the lab. We also had a lot of files that we found in this bin that was knocked over on the floor, and we learned earlier in the course how to examine checks for forgery, which we found in one of our files, so we were able to come up with a reason as to why our suspect would have been breaking into the office, because one of the checks was forged.
It was actually pretty interesting because we thought we had a lot of evidence, and then we realized that we actually missed some on the first day, and whether that was because it fell on the ground or we just overlooked it, it made me realize that it was a lot harder or a lot more in-depth than I had originally thought. My favorite part was when we analyzed the evidence, because we wound up with a carton with files inside, and when we looked in the files, we actually found a bunch of clues that helped us figure out who did it.
Come the end of the week, when each group turns in their final, detailed report, what do the students have to say about this unique final exam experience?
I thought the final was really cool, and it let us use every aspect of what we learned in just 1 week of solving a crime.
If anyone really wants to go into forensics, this is an awesome starting point. I mean, you'll go into college knowing a lot more than other people might really know. And being on a crime scene like this for the final, I think it's really interesting and cool. It's more real.
I loved it. It's my favorite class I've had in all 4 years of being in high school, so definitely think everyone should take it.